shifting from the broader market opportunity of energy generation, energy storage, and electric vehicle charging networks, let's take a deep dive into project economics and look at a Utah specific example and how this is such an incredible economic opportunity, particularly when we look at the available tax credits, grants, and rebates. It's important to note that we're taking a very strong sector of solar generation that's been now proven out over the past 15 years to be financially viable and have relatively low risk, and transforming it into an incredible opportunity. And we're doing that by really changing the project economics and bringing all of the other benefits of agrivoltaics that has impact on the ag and the soil and the water, but specifically from the project financing of the solar generation, energy storage, and EV charging network, transforming it into the greatest investment opportunity of all time. And we're going to see how we can have the opportunity to discount these projects 60 to 80%, really improving the economic performance and further reducing the risk of installing what is a high-tech system. And there are an abundance of tax credits, grants, and rebates at the federal, state, county, and a lot of NGOs to support these systems. But we're going to focus here on just the big three. And the big three are the solar investment tax credit of 30% on the total project cost. And that this is a very powerful tax credit because when we look at the distinction between a tax credit and a tax deduction, a tax credit reduces the tax liability versus a deduction, which reduces down the taxable revenue. This is also a very flexible tax credit because the tax credit can be taken at the project level if there's sufficient tax liability, or if there's not, an investment group that's investing in the solar project can take a portion or all of the tax credit. And if there's not sufficient appetite at the project or the investment group, there's what is called tax equity, where businesses and organizations are looking to purchase renewable energy tax credits will actually pay for it. So it's a very powerful and large tax credit that has a lot of flexibility to make sure that it can be realized. And then we also have the USDA REAP grant. And this is an incredible program that allows for up to 40% of the solar renewable energy and efficiency to come back as a cash rebate at project completion. So combining a big tax credit with cash infusion that can often come year one if the system comes online absolutely transforms project economics, because a big infusion of capital allows for a bigger reduction in risk and flexibility to make sure that there's capital to be able to support the project over a long time frame. And then we're going to look at depreciation. Depreciation will have variable on how much it can be realized depending on the equipment that's installed and also the federal and state tax rates. But we're using a pretty conservative number of 10%. In not counting the many more federal, state, and local programs, we can see that just the big three could realize up to an 80% reduction in total system cost. So let's take a deeper dive into REAP, the Renewable Energy for America program. And this is a very powerful program from the USDA whose intention is to promote energy efficiency and renewable energy development for agricultural producers and rural small businesses through grants and loan guarantees. Now, in this transmission, we're specifically focusing on the grant, but it's important to note that they have a very powerful financing arm that will finance up to 75% of a project cost that can be used in combination and synergized with the grant to create the optimal financial situation. So who's eligible for REAP? Any agricultural producer in rural or non-rural areas. An agricultural producer is defined as at least 50% of gross income coming from agricultural operations, which is, of course, crops and livestock, but also includes processing and distribution, really all aspects of the agricultural value chain. And in addition to producers, small business and rural electric cooperatives in eligible rural areas. And these are areas that have populations of less than 50,000 residents. And the easiest way to determine if it's REAP eligible is just go to the link here, put in the address and it will show you on the map whether or not it's eligible. And that this is a very broad category of shops, automotives, shops, mills, manufacturing, and hotels. As long as a business is in a rural area, it's REAP eligible. So let's look at the history of REAP and what a incredibly powerful program it's been. Going back to 2008, hundreds of millions of dollars in REAP grants have been awarded to renewable energy projects. And we can see that there was a peak in 2010, a drop through 2012, and then peak again in 2015 of over $70 million in grants being awarded a year. And then in 2022, there were a little over $40 million that was awarded to 844 projects in 46 states. And these are a wide range of renewable energy systems, from small projects of $16,000 in REAP grant up to $25 million. So REAP is this powerful program with a huge history, and we can see that that powerful program just got absolutely upgraded under the Inflation Reduction Act, which increased the grant amount and made it accessible to a wider range of businesses. And the REAP program guidelines are a maximum grant up to 40% of the project's eligible costs in two categories: a $500,000 maximum grant for energy efficiency and $1 million maximum grant for renewable energy projects. It's important to note that this grant assistance is taxable income, so that needs to be calculated into the project economics. Projects greater than $200,000 in size require a technical report, and energy efficiency projects require an energy audit and assessment. So let's look at the broad range in these two categories. So up to $1 million in maximum grant for renewable energy projects. And these are virtually all types of renewable energy generation: small and large solar, small and large wind, hydropower below 30 megawatts, which is a sizable hydropower system, biomass, biodiesel and ethanol, geothermal, anaerobic digesters, biomass, gasifiers, solid fuels, and even ocean tidal generation. And then if we look at energy efficiency improvements, up to a $500,000 maximum grant for anything to make the farm, ranch, or rural business more efficient. And this is, again, a very broad category of building envelope, lighting, insulation, HVAC, irrigation, water heating, power systems, refrigeration, drying, curing, fans, blowers, compressors, and pumps. And I would offer that all farms and ranches have old or aging equipment that could be upgraded to make them more efficient. So when we combine these two categories of $1 million of precisely designed renewable energy generation to really access the abundance of indigenous energy, what is in the land, the solar, the wind, how the water flows, the geothermal, with the opportunity to make the project more efficient with up to $500,000 in grant funding, a combined $1.5 million in grant funding. And it's also important to note that this is an annual project funding that is funded annually. So many projects, particularly utility scale, are going to be phased over several years. So one could see going back and qualifying for REAP over multiple phases of the project. And it's also important to note that this is a competitive grant. So, there's only a certain amount of funding that's available every year. But when you look at an agrivoltaic generation and storage project, it does make it more competitive because it's not only going to be strong from an energy perspective, but it's providing a holistic spectrum of benefits in the ag operation, the water, and the soil. So agrivoltaic storage and generation projects have the opportunity to be more competitive and a higher chance of being successful in getting access to REAP funding. So let's go and look at a specific project example. And we're going to take a cattle ranch in southern Utah that's 160 acres, where we integrate an agrivoltaic storage system and an EV fleet and charging network. And here we want to take this holistic perspective where we're looking at the power grid, the ag grid, the hydro grid, the soil grid, and then the transportation grid. So in this example, We're looking at a cattle ranch that sits on Scenic Byway 12 in Boulder, Utah. And when we look at the acreage from the big picture, we can see that there's 110 acres of pasture, and then there's ranch buildings and facilities that sit on 10 acres. This also has a sliver of the parcel that sits right along Byway 12 of 3 acres. And there's also 40 acres of forest and riparian area surrounding the pastures. So when we look at the power grid, we're creating two aspects. One, there's going to be utility scale generation, and then we're also designing a microgrid at the facility. For the utility scale, we're creating a qualifying facility that's designed for optimal solar generation to meet a power purchase agreement. In this case, it would be with Garcane Energy, putting the appropriate level of grid energy storage to provide those grid support services and also support public EV charging. And in this case, we're going to put in a biomass generator of 50 kilowatts, which directly feeds into the energy storage system. And then we're also designing a microgrid with optimal distributed generation at the facility level, the appropriate level of energy storage, the integration of the farm fleet electric vehicles, and EV charging for them, and how we can enhance local facility, and then installing the public EV charging on the parcel that sits on Scenic Byway 12. So to look at this power grid, we're creating a dual access solar tracker system with bifacial solar fence into paddocks for regenerative rotational grazing. And if we look at an overview of just one of the paddocks, we can see the dual axis solar trackers and the bifacial solar fence. And these are 700 by 200 feet or 140,000 square feet of pasture within each of the individual paddocks. And so of the total pasture, 110 acres that are available, we're creating a solar field of 20 acres with 1.5 megawatts of dual access tracking and 500 kilowatts of bifacial solar fence to create a 2 megawatt utility scale generation facility that's happening in synergy with the facility microgrid on the 10 acres. And there's just a lot of the calculations here in the 20 acres to show per paddock and the number of trackers. And one of the interesting parts is we've been looking at this and other projects is to look at the ratio between solar trackers and the bifacial solar fence. And there's a wonderful synergy between the two, and it creates a very unique generation profile in how much it can produce. So then looking at the facility microgrid, we're integrating 100 kilowatts of building integrated PV along with solar PVT thermal and a combination of some of that solar fence around the facility, and then distributed EV charging for guests and for the farm electrified fleet. We have the utility scale energy storage up at the top, and then biomass gasifier. And as we look at integrating building integrated PV, a lot of times the default is think about putting on the roofs, which may be the viable strategy, but often we find it's more beneficial to look at creating covered areas that for covered parking, for awnings on the workshops or some of the farm homes. And in this case, we looked at creating solar covered corrals because this is a cattle ranch operation, and when the cows are birthing or need to be in it, it's very hot in a small area. So creating vital shade for the critters so they can be more comfortable when they're in the corrals. And this is interesting from a asset valuation because by going and creating additional covered area, we're actually increasing the asset value of the facility. This goes with created it more usable area and more valuable from an operational perspective. So moving out of power, let's look at the ag, soil, and hydro grid. In the ag grid, in addition to designing the power system to be optimal, we also want to design it for optimal ag operations. And this is currently a cattle ranch, but by integrating bifacial solar fence, we have the opportunity to come in and bring multi-species, sheep, chickens, bison, pigs, and then we're always conscious of how this is impacting the pollinators. And then currently this is mixed grass or hay field, but the opportunity to integrate flowers and native species, and then how we're looking at the forest that's around it and how this is impacting the soil grid and improving soil health, atmospheric carbon, organic matter, and soil moisture. And then by bringing in a biomass generator, we can take ag waste from the ag operation, but also this is a business use case that we can bring in additional biomass from cleaning the forest, which makes them more healthy and reduces down fire risk to create power, heat, and water to be into the microgrid. And then from the hydrogrid, we're integrating precision water irrigation and storage with the agrivoltaic system to improve the water efficiency at the ag operation, but also how it can participate in watershed restoration. So we can look at this 20-acre field as a hydrogrid where we're using precision irrigation to integrate with the bifacial solar fence and using the superstructure of the solar system to be able to create this synergistic benefits of not only using a lot less water because of the shade that's being created from the solar system, but also reducing down that high capital cost of needing to get water to the pasture by using the solar system infrastructure. And then also the benefits to the solar system that we're cleaning the panels more often every time that we're irrigating and keeping the panels cooler. So we already looked at this example within the EV fleet and microgrid, but just to summarize, in this use case, we're looking at a large 6-vehicle integration and a total of $305,000 outlay that's net with the tax credits, and then the reduction in fuel expenses of 161,000 over 5 years, and the ability to use 750 kilowatt hours of energy storage in the vehicles in a vehicle to grid operation supporting the utility scale microgrid. And then we're also integrating a public charging station right on scenic Byway 12 to bring additional power revenue at variable market costs that can be bundled with the ranch products. And also the opportunity to be able to come and tour through agro-tourism, this incredible and stunningly beautiful facility for ranch visitors. And let's break this all down and look at a total project example. So in this, we're looking at a capital investment of $3.5 million to install 2 megawatts of solar, a 5 megawatt hour energy storage with a 1 megawatt capacity utility scale energy storage system. We're putting in a commercial grade 50 kilowatt biomass gasifier system and installing precision irrigation and solar panel cleaning system along with a public EV charging station. In addition, 100 kilowatt building integrated PV microgrid with 6 ranch fleet vehicles that provide 750 kilowatt hours of energy storage. So looking at the solar side, 1.25 million going into dual access tracking and 400,000 into the solar fence. These fall into the REAP renewable energy project category of 40%. So that's 500,000, $160,000 in grant, and then also qualifies for the solar investment tax credit of 30%. The precision irrigation and solar cleaning system goes into energy efficiency improvement category. The energy storage falls into the energy storage project, also qualifies for the investment tax credit. The biomass gasifier into the renewable energy generation. Then looking at the microgrid with the PVT system, and also integrating energy efficiency and HVAC heating, and also doing some rehab and renovation on doors, windows, and the electrical system to upgrade it more efficient, installing the public EV charging system, and also the EV fleet. So that brings the year one total capital investment of $3.5 million. Total REAP grant, $992,000 in renewable energy generation, $238,000 in energy efficiency, for a total of $1.2 million in cash coming back into this agrivoltaic storage generation project year one. And to really highlight how transformational that is, to really turbocharge the project economics and really create a lot of lower risk in the project because there's a huge infusion of cash. Then we had the investment tax credit of $742,000. And then we're using the depreciation of a federal tax rate of 25% plus a 5% tax rate for a total of 30%. And that equates to $511,000 year one, because in 2023, there's an 80% bonus depreciation. And that brings net system cost year one to 72% reduction. And then because the remaining depreciation of 20% comes in over the next 2 to 5 years, that brings the total year 5 to a 78% reduction in total project cost. Now, it's just incredible to witness how this synergy of grants, credits, rebates, along with the strong economics of solar energy storage and electric vehicle charging, really creates an incredible investment opportunity. A utility scale microgrid example. And then let's look at a smaller one, investing $750,000 to create 450 kilowatt hours of solar, 500 kilowatt hours of energy storage with 100 kilowatt hours of power, precision irrigation, solar panel cleaning system, and the same 100 kilowatt BIPV system. But in this case, we're only going to use 3 vehicles for the ranch fleet for a total of 370 kilowatt hours of energy storage. Going through the exact same numbers, we can see how this plays out. And we can see year one, $750,000 in capital invested. Total REAP grant is $184,000 in cash coming back to the project. $130,000 in a federal income tax credit. Depreciation is $72,000 year one, along with the electric vehicle tax credit, puts it at a 53% discount year one. That as we realize the rest of the depreciation goes down to 58% by year 5. So this is the greatest investment opportunity of all time, because we're investing in farms and ranches to really solve the structural issues that farms and ranches have been facing for generations, and really providing long-term revenue, big tax credits, and cash flowing back into the project. And we're also creating huge economic opportunity for more than just the ag operations to be able to create jobs to support what is a more diverse economic opportunity and really transform the future of agriculture, to not only feed us, but to power us. And also we can create a more regenerative future from the farms and the ranches as part of this bottom-up and inside-out transformation. Thank you for taking the time to watch this section of the Utah Agrivoltaic Storage and EV Microgrid Market Intelligence Analysis. It's my prayer that you found a lot of really valuable knowledge and insights and hopefully inspiration about how you can participate in taking the great state of Utah and transforming it into more abundant, secure, and prosperous future for all Utahns, but how Utah is really a keystone state within the heart of the Rocky Mountains that has the opportunity to really integrate with this incredible 7-state regional market, and how Utah is an economic powerhouse and technological innovation hub can really inform that regional market, the broader United States and the world. And regardless of what channel you're finding this transmission, that you'd be inspired to watch all sections of this market intelligence analysis, which you can find at butterflypower.org. And we would be humbled and honored if you'd give it some love, a like, and share it, specifically with a farmer or a rancher or investors who are looking at investing their capital in ways to create a more regenerative future, or really anyone who's wanting to come and participate in this broad scale, bottom up, inside out transformation of our economy, our energy system, and our environment. And it's just a blessing to be here in this time and to participate in this great and good work. And we are the butterfly generation. It's time to rise and shine. Time to transform and fly.